Today, we are joined on the show by Nguyen, CEO and founder of Makelog. Makelog helps fast shipping product development teams communicate what they ship to their stakeholders, internal or external, via feed of changes known as the Product Changelog. Changelog's ethos is to enable continuous communication for builders in today's fast shipping culture. There are a ton of parallels between how JJ is building Makelog and how we think about shipping products at Jam. And just overall, JJ is a founder that I really respect and admire and trust. And I'm so excited to have her here. Prior to building Makelog, JJ was a growth stage tech startup operator with experience in analytics, sales, product marketing, and customer success at some of the companies I admire most, like Warby Parker, Segment, Scale, and Radar. And so it only makes sense that JJ ventured to build a product to help software teams and their stakeholders share product iteration in this fast-paced SaaS world. We're so excited to have her. JJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
JJ, can we just start with, there's so many things happening in your world right now. What are you most excited about? What are you excited about right now?
I'm super excited about what we're working on right now at Makelog. It's a whole new version of the app, and it's really our way of bringing continuous communication to life. I think this is a concept I've talked about for so long now, just this idea of how do you scale communication, specifically release communication, when your development team is shipping faster than ever before. So we're working on a lot of really cool stuff, particularly around a change feed and what it looks like to have this sort of single pane of glass that gives you a real sense of what's done across all of your tools and how that fits into automation. I think there's been a lot of talk around automation and the role of GPT and AI in, sort of facilitating more streamlined communication. And I'm just excited about how we're finally starting to stitch all that together in the name of continuous communication. So I'm pretty jazzed about what we're working on.
I've seen mock-ups and previews, and like, holy smokes, it's super cool.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's really amazing. What is continuous communication? Like, what do you mean by that? How did you arrive at that term?
Yeah. So continuous communication is really about figuring out all the different kind of points during the development process, both when features and things are in progress to when they ultimately get communicated out to customers. And so continuous communication is really about identifying what those points are and streamlining it so that you're never missing a beat. I think something that I learned in my background, just my experience working on customer-facing teams at Segment, at Scale, is that it's really hard to stay on top of every little thing that ships. And there's very much this kind of long tail of things that just fall through the cracks. And so continuous communication is really about how do you make sure that you're able to communicate all the things that your team is actually shipping in the right way, the right channel, the right frequency and cadence to the right audience when they need to know about them.
This is one of those things that, in a perfect world, every single time an engineer fixes a bug that a user reported, as soon as it's out, we tell the user. And as soon as we ship any UI tweak, that we tweet about it with like a nice GIF. And as soon as a change is on staging, all the relevant people who need to test and check it out can go and do that. And it sounds so simple, and it's really, really, really hard to do in practice. And actually, I just reached out to you last week because we as a team were discussing how can we make this happen. And I was like, wait, there's a tool for this.
Yeah, we're super excited about that use case too, by the way. Just this idea of, hey, something is actually on staging, and how do you communicate it to the people who need to test more proactively? It's really about kind of shrinking that gap between when something actually is, ready for QA or on production, and ultimately when it's communicated to the person that needs to do something about it.
It's also about leveraging the strengths of the whole entire team to have this sort of product release velocity. Like, in a perfect world, it's not, there's marketing and there's product and there's engineering and there's QA and it's siloed and there's support. It would actually be just one team. Everyone's aware of what's going on, and they all do what they do best to support customers, to inform customers, to help educate new customers, and to show off to the existing customers what is now possible for them.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that that's been part of the underlying fabric of our team as well. Like, I'm always talking about being a glue person at our company. And so how do you bridge this gap between the business side and the technical side and kind of have everyone converge toward more of this common level of ultimately serving the customer. It's really what it's about.
Can you take us back? Like, what was the day that you just sat down and you're like, yes, this is what I'm going to start this company. Like, that's it. I can't take it anymore. Someone has to build this and it's going to be me.
Yeah, I think that honestly, what it was really colored by just a lot of reflection on my time at really Segment in the early days when I was in customer success there. This was back in 2015, where the field of customer success was still kind of this thing that people didn't really understand. Like, are they technical or are they not technical? And I think what I learned in that role was the value of product expertise and how I could really use that to create value for our customers who literally at the time were like, I don't get what Segment is, or how is this different from Google Tag Manager, or what even is a tracking plan? And realized that for me to be able to do a great job and knock things out of the park for our customers, I really needed to be an expert on the product. The thing is, though, when you're working at a fast shipping company, things are happening all the time, and it's really hard to stay on top of those things. So for me, it was very much this reflection on just that pain point and realizing that there had to be a better way and that I couldn't have been the only person to have felt this way.
It reminds me of experiences I had at Cloudflare when the company was growing very quickly. And it's like being a victim of your own success. Part of growing really fast as a startup is there are like minor growing pains, and one of it is it used to be that everyone could know everything that's going on, and then suddenly there are teams in multiple offices across multiple time zones all around the world, and you're just not going to get the same information flow. And when it doesn't work well, it feels like the teams are working against each other. Like support feels unsupported by engineering or by product, and sales feel like it feels like these frustrations between teams, it's us versus them. And in moments where it works so well, it feels like the company's coming together to unlock new possibilities for the customer. And that's the dream.
Yeah, everybody rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. So one thing that I really loved seeing is you've had this vision of where the world should be and how companies should operate and how everyone in the company can work together to deliver new information, new features and new releases to customers in a way that feels like very like smooth and great. And as the new possibilities came online with AI, you were one of the first startups I saw who took it and ran with it. Can you walk us through like how did you figure out what to build with what was possible today? And then what did you build and any learnings?
I think that there's a really, there's a really fine line between sort of as a founder being very visionary and being too dogmatic about how you see the world and what your particular solution should be. And that's something that we, honestly struggled a little bit with in the early days. I mean, I think if Makelog in 2022 was very much all about, hey, release everything, publish everything, we've really had to take a good, long, hard look at that and see, is that really what's going to benefit our users? I think what we heard a lot of feedback that, maybe I don't want to communicate every little thing to the user. Maybe, that's not how I want to do things. And so 2023 is very much this sort of journey of, how do we basically build flexibility into the product to let you communicate, you decide as the user, you decide as the customer, how often you want to communicate things.
Oh my God, that was awesome. Tell us about the moment you saw AI for the first time and then how you figured out what to do with it and like what that process looked like internally.
So GPT has played a really interesting role in the journey of Makelog, actually from the very beginning, because it was actually in 2020, 2021 that we started playing around with it, trying to see the possibilities, what could be done with this, what does it do with Jira ticket titles when you throw them in. And we kind of just weren't sure what people were going to want to do with that. I think we heard so much of this, hey, I kind of hate writing release notes. How do I make this process better and less of a pain in the butt? And then we would say, okay, well, you can automate all this. And it was met with a lot of skepticism. So I think early on we were sort of like, GPT, people aren't ready for it. And then all of a sudden, you had ChatGPT come out on the scene last year, and it just caught fire. And so I think it was around that time that folks on the team were just like, we gotta play around with this. We gotta see what's changed here. I think there's been this sort of mainstreamness, I guess. It's gone mainstream enough to the point where it's like, okay, we can't really ignore this anymore. And so really that launch that we did with GPT earlier this year was very much just sort of like a YOLO experiment of sorts, just like, let's throw it out there and see what people do with it. And people were super excited about it. And so now we're trying to think about, what are other ways we can infuse the product with AI, and not just for the sake of it, but really, I mean, when you think about release communication, it's such a great use case for GPT and AI, if only because it's one of these things that is relatively low stakes, like if it's wrong, but if it's right or close enough to right, it saves you a massive amount of time. And that's invaluable.
Yes. So I was one of the people who saw this on Twitter and was like, this is so exciting and so cool. Can you tell everyone how you incorporated GPT so far? Like, what does it do in Makelog?
Yeah. So today in Makelog, basically, when you set up your sources or your integrations, like your Linear or Jira or GitHub instance, basically Makelog we allow you to pretty much apply GPT to your ticket titles and transform it into a draft release note. And there's a lot of really cool stuff we're doing with that as well, and how we're planning on using it for just things like automatically applying labels to it and types and different things like that to ultimately just like expedite the whole process. All that manual toil involved in creating customer facing updates, you can basically do that in Makelog.
What I love about this so much is there's a lot of talk about how AI is going to make everyone more productive, or like AI can help you do more with less. And out of the box, it takes a lot of creativity and work to figure out how it's actually going to apply, like how you're actually going to get those productivity gains for your startup. But with Makelog and other tools that are incorporating AI to make the tool save the user even more time, it's really clear how AI brings productivity gains to startup. Like, for example, it's, in 2023, you really want to be building with your users in public. And that's because users don't want the anonymous company anymore. They want a relationship and a conversation with the builders behind the company, which makes perfect sense. People always wanted that. It was impossible until we got this, like, this feathered out social media landscape where you can actually do that.
Right.
And so every young startup wants to be publishing great release notes on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on email, and to their website. But it takes a lot of work for one person, like dedicated all the time to making it really awesome. It's like almost like a marketing role, like a DevRel role, which most startups don't have that person. But suddenly, if you get 80% of it the way there with a tool like Makelog, it empowers the startup to do more and achieve their dreams and build the way they want to and have that relationship with their users without having to have someone full-time deployed in it. So I just love how you're helping people get these productivity gains with AI that everyone's talking about in like a very concrete way.
Totally. Appreciate that.
What was it like to incorporate this new technology into your product? Like, how is this different than building features that don't have a GPT aspect?
Well, it was certainly really exciting for the team. I think it just like really pumped everybody up. And there's a certain freedom. I called it before, I called it a YOLO experiment. And I think that there's a certain freedom in kind of not taking yourselves all that seriously. I mean, we take our work seriously, but as far as this feature, it was very much just like hey, let's get it out there. Let's just like prioritize getting it out there. Whereas I think traditionally, we've had a tendency to really be ultra super careful about what it is we're putting out there, and, having kind of perfectionist tendencies, when really this was something where we gave ourselves permission to almost just kind of like get it out there and into people's hands as fast as possible, just to kind of sort of ride that AI wave while it was hot, to strike while the iron is hot. And it was just so fun. Oh my gosh. The team just was so pumped about it. I think we got that landing page and everything up in a week. So yeah, it was really awesome.
Wow. And this is something we've heard often from people building with AI is that you're never going to catch all the edge cases internally. And so at some point you have to take a leap of faith and you have to ship. But
Yeah.
then you have to be really good at getting user feedback, because if you don't, then you're going to have like a sort of a messy thing in public. But it's really hard to get good quality user feedback Do you have a process or a couple tips or some advice for people who are shipping these AI features and want to get feedback really quickly?
Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, we make use of Slack channels with our customers. I think a lot of people are starting to do that. And that's something where we try to make it a point to regularly communicate things. I think you guys do actually a really exceptional job of this as well, which is giving little update, even if you're not quite, maybe you haven't shipped the thing quite yet for the user, but just giving them a heads up into, hey, we're working on this, or here's where we're at with this. I think it goes back to what you were saying before around people wanting a relationship with the builders. People want to know they don't. I think that's another thing where we always kind of think, oh, well, we can't let them know until it's done. And in reality, it's just letting them know that we're still thinking of you. And here's where we haven't forgotten about you, I think goes such a long way.
It's also so in line with what you're building. It's like all about really communication and how that builds relationships and how that empowers customers to do more. Like that's so in line. I'm curious if there were any other differences in building with AI versus just building kind of traditional features. One thing that we noticed is when we build traditional features, we can do a lot more planning up front. So before an engineer ever sees the spec, you know, we're doing a ton of market research, we're writing our PRDs, the designer has designed all of the edge cases and all the possible flows. We've done like a ton of thought about how we're going to market this thing. Like a lot of, I mean, we're an early stage startup, so it's not like Microsoft. It's not tons of lead time. There are a couple of weeks where we're doing like lots of planning. But when we built it with AI, it was like we could only do a little bit of planning up front, but we needed to start building in order to iterate. And the designer couldn't design until we started seeing it. And the PM couldn't give feedback until there was a prompt in action and the PM could like try it out and keep saying like, this doesn't quite feel right. Like keep it and look, work really closely with the engineer. So I guess in traditional software development, the PM and designer worked at the very beginning and the very end. But actually here, it was like very little in the very beginning, very end. And actually, they were really partnered every single day, iterating with the engineer. We thought that was super different and very interesting. I wonder if there's anything like that that you noticed building with AI. No worries if not.
I think for us, the way that design and engineering kind of worked together on this was there was sort of the engineering side of it, which was the output and the iteration that went into prompt engineering and sort of tweaking that to ultimately the output that was usable. And then from a design standpoint, it was very much about like, yeah, the UX behind it all. Like, when is the proper time to introduce GPT? Do we do it automatically when the user lands on this page? Are we automatically creating, are you like landing in Makelog and seeing auto-generated drafts of your release notes from Jira or from Linear from the get-go? Or is this a button that you're actually actively pressing? And is there an undo? What happens if there is an undo? Like, can you like regenerate different drafts? And so there was a lot of thinking that went into more of like the exact UX behind it that I think was really more the role of our design team versus the actual sort of like mechanics of, well, okay, what is GPT kind of outputting here? And is that usable or not usable?
Yes, you're so right. It's like typically there's a lot of product design work that is like, what does this visually look like in moments of time? But here, what this actually looks like is like chat bubbles for our product, and it looks
Yeah.
like text on the screen in your product. Like it looks like the same release note the user writes. And actually, the design is about feel and moments and how it unravels in the product. And it's a very different skill set, I guess, for designers.
Yeah. It's also just weird because it's so unprecedented, right? Like, you can't just ask a user, like, when would you expect to have
Yeah.
AI take over this part of the process for you, And it's one of these things where I think even just like showing people mock-up like we've been doing with you guys has helped tremendously. Just what would you expect this to do, or what would be more convenient for you here? And, could you live with it if we did wind up just writing your drafts for you? Like, what would that feel like for you? And, thinking about that. So,
I want to double click on this. One thing I've noticed working with you and your team is you show us a ton of early work and you're constantly asking for feedback. And I think a lot of startups hear that they should be asking for feedback, doing user research, but there's not a lot of talk out there about what that actually looks like and what feels productive versus what doesn't. What have you found works really well with you and your team? Like, how do you solicit user feedback? How early do you do it? what are tips and advice you have for other founders who are trying to do that more of that?
One thing that works well for us is, or one thing that I guess we're just fortunate to have is everyone on the team cares deeply about our users. That was something that I looked for from day one, first and foremost. And I think it's really easy for us to fall into this trap of, again, being too dogmatic or too sort of in our own, have tunnel vision really about what the product really should be. And so we'll do this thing like where, we'll go crazy kind of with mock-ups and go down these rabbit holes. And Logan is just so fast. Logan, our designer, is just so fast, and he'll just like throw a bunch of things together. And it creates this crazy scope creep, which maybe you've, I don't know, experienced from time to time. But for us, I've always tried to remind the team, like, we gotta reel this back, because none of this matters at all. Doesn't matter if we think it's really cool, right? If our users don't get it or if it's confusing, like, better that we know that now before we build the thing than to ship this thing and have people be like, wait, what? And have wasted, however long for development.
Can you talk about what are the tactics that you do to get that early feedback? Because I've been seeing you guys show us so many early things. You ask us great questions about it. How do you actually solicit that early feedback? What do you do?
Well, one thing we try to do is we want to have multiple options and ideas to put in front of people, because we'll create a couple of different like prototypes, or maybe a couple different screens even, and we'll put them in front of folks, and we'll kind of just leave it open-ended and say, hey, how does this make you feel? What would you expect to do here? And try to ask, a lot of open-ended questions, a lot of just like, or we'll do that. We'll sometimes do specific questions if there are specific pieces around the flow that we're looking for. And really, it's more, we'll take that and immediately try to act on it. Or so we'll revise. Maybe that's just revising the mock-up, or maybe it's actually like building something really quick and easy, like even locally to share. And then we'll make sure to follow back up and show the folks like, hey, this is how we're thinking about this. Or we'll kind of brainstorm, like in the case of the use case that we're working on for you guys, just talking through a few different options here of, well, could we potentially get to that, doing this, would this work? And just, okay, nope, that's not going to work for them. We're going to go this path instead. And so just always trying to be really tight with listening to the feedback, incorporating it fast, even if it's just a mock-up or just a conversation even, and kind of keeping that rolling, like not letting it go stale, I guess, in between feedback from when they give the feedback to when you actually follow up.
Something you said really resonated, which is you said you're lucky to work on a team where everyone really cares about the customer. And interacting with your team, I can tell you, like, we feel that on the receiving end. Having a team that cares about users truly is not only beneficial for building great product, but it also makes the users feel so great because they feel supported, and like there's an excitement for solving the internal problems, and like they're really going to be delivery on the promise. It's a special feeling to be on the other side of that. But beyond that, I think you've built this like really special team. Like it's creative, it's quality, like such friendly, like such humble and talented people. And when you start a startup, it's not always clear what to hire for. Like, can you talk about what are the traits that you've seen really succeed in your startup, and what you're now hiring for, and what you've learned from building this team?
I would say one of the most important traits, especially for a startup at, this early on, is a sense of urgency. I know we hear that all the time, but, when I think about sense of urgency, I'm thinking somebody who, if it's something that you can get done literally right now, you'll just do it right now. Like, not, hey, okay, let me think about this and let me get back to you next week, or like, let's factor this in for next week, but really just like a sense of just the importance of acting quickly and having a bias toward action. That was something that got drilled into me really early on, actually, at Warby Parker. That was one of their original core values. And it's so true. You really just need that can do sort of, I'll get it done mentality. So that's definitely the number one thing I look for. And the other is just like, honestly, empathy. It's having an understanding and an appreciation for what other folks on the team do, or just having that kind of holistic sense, right, of what it actually takes to make our startup successful. It isn't just engineering. It isn't just the sales and marketing side. It's um, really just all of that together. And I look for folks who really have a strong sense of that. Um, because the other part of it is, people say this again all the time, but you wear lots of different hats. And so it helps me a lot, particularly as a solo founder, to have folks on the team that can step up and do whatever it takes to make Makelog successful.
Can you talk about how, like, those are great traits. How do you screen for them in an interview process? How do you find people with a sense of urgency? Or what are the questions you ask? And then same for empathy.
Yeah, well, I think the empathy thing is pretty easy. That one is, you'll ask questions around what's a really big accomplishment that you've had, or how have you handled, you know, uh, how have you handled a problem, or how, tell me about the last time you shipped something great. And it's really just the way that they talk about it, right? Are they taking too much credit, right? I think we have this tendency to try to emphasize a lot of like what we did and maybe exaggerate that a little bit, but like, do they talk about it like a team effort? Do they acknowledge that? Are they humble in that sense? Can they give credit to other folks? And then on the flip side, when you're talking about something that went wrong, are they quick to point fingers? Are they blaming the circumstances around them? I think that's the thing. Actually, this is kind of tied to the sense of urgency and sort of internal locus of control, I think, which is how do they talk about it, about failures? Do they think about it? Do they place blame externally, or are they reflecting on, I'm not saying fall on your sword by any means, but are they reflecting on things that they could have done differently? I think that's the other thing, which is I always try to find folks who feel like they are in control of their own destiny, and that there's always something that they can improve on. I think that sense of just constant growth is just all tied to it all, in what makes a really great hire.
Amazing. Okay, JJ, take us back to the very, very beginning. What was the MVP of Makelog like? Like, what was the first thing you built?
Oh my gosh. It was ugly. It was cartoonish looking. So I'm pretty sure I had taken this like $20, like 1 week Figma prototyping class actually through On Deck. And I didn't know the first thing about Figma back then. And I just kind of hacked together this first design. There was pink and purple in there, Danny. It was ridiculous. But it was essentially this changelog tool that you could kind of drag and drop GitHub or GitHub pull requests or Jira issues into like this editor and create this post. And it was, very much the core idea that still remains today, which is this idea of reusing the context you've already like kind of captured in different tools and using it to generate something customer facing. Um, but yeah, it was just a little janky, and I think it was a really interesting learning experience for us because number one, I think what we realized is dragging and dropping just verbatim like the title of a pull request into a changelog entry was not ideal, like most of the time. And we heard this feedback ad nauseum, but it was just far too jargony, way too much jargon, way too much eng speak to just press print on. And so that was just like such a quick learning that MVP enabled for us, which is, hey, this is not really going to be great. And people are really always ever going to want to um, curate their release notes to be a lot more customer facing and human readable. And so how do we enable that in the product?
And then you've iterated so much. And at each iteration of learned, like, oh, users need this. And that's how this like really amazing product has come to be today. How did you manage those iterations internally? Like, what advice do you have for founders looking to like move fast, iterate, get to product market fit?
My number one tip is truly, truly listen to what your users are saying, and don't fall into this trap of thinking you know better or trying to get too cute and clever with things, because in an effort to differentiate or to realize, don't hold too strongly to your vision or be willing to adapt, really, because, an example of this is we heard for so long that people wanted a way for their users to subscribe to email updates. We heard it for so long before we were like, okay, let's just do this. And I think part of that was just us saying, we told ourselves it's the sources, it's the integration with GitHub and Jira that's the most important thing. And people were just like, hey, that's cool, but I really want my users to be able to subscribe to update. And we just were like, okay, but we'll get to that eventually. And then lo and behold, as soon as we did that, that was one of the most popular launches we ever had, really, with the product. And people love that feature. And it's just wild that, we were sort of in our own heads about it a lot. And I would say the number one tip is just don't have moments like that, and really just like unpack and figure out what it is that users are really asking you for, um, when you're thinking about what to build.
When, as a founder, should you take a leap and say, users are asking us for a faster horse and I'm going to build a car? And when should you say, like, no, that's valid and they really need that faster? Like let me just take it verbatim.
I think when you start to think about what it is they're really asking you for, part of it is what they're asking for right now. Will this work for other users? And also, are other users asking for this thing? Because what you don't want to do is build something, especially verbatim for, um, a particular user, if the underlying idea is common across lots of different folks, but the solution that they're proposing to you is not. And so it's really on you to think about this particular bit of feedback against all the other feedback you've gotten and really ascertain, what are they really asking for here? And is there a way that I can actually address this that'll work for all of our users?
That I found that to be a really tricky thing because all of Twitter or whatever is like, don't exactly listen to your users. But actually, we found the best success when we just listen to our users. Like they're like the experts of their domain and they're pretty good at knowing actually fairly closely what they want. And sometimes we can go, above and beyond and surprise them with something they didn't realize they needed. But oftentimes, actually, by ignoring the advice of trying to be the Steve Jobs and just invent something brand new and just listening to what people are really pulling you in the direction of, we've gotten the most excitement about new features, what people wanted.
Yeah. It's hard though. It is really hard to kind of know, especially since we're in the business of innovating. And if we weren't doing, if we weren't innovating and if we weren't doing new things, it wouldn't be as hard.
Yes, yes. So, last question for you. You've learned it so much. You're a first time founder, you're a couple years in, and just the journey so far has been so amazing. When you look back and you think, like, okay, now knowing everything I know, here's the advice I would give to me on day one as a first time founder.
Oh man, it sounds so cliche, but it really is about just shipping the damn thing. Just get things out fast. Don't overthink things. Don't try to be clever. Just literally ship things because you're never going to get the honest, raw, ugly, hard to hear feedback, that you absolutely need to move your business forward unless you just get things out there into people's hands. Even mock-ups, honestly, I mean, don't come as close, but just getting things out there and really seeing, uh, what do people do with this? What do people want? What are people like asking for? What does this lack? And going from there.
That's amazing advice. It's funny. If I were to go back to my, first time founder self on day one, I think I would say a variation of it, but it's different enough that it's worth calling out, which is yes, ship it fast, but keep the scope so small that you can ship it bug free. Because one of the learnings we had building Jam early on is when we just tried to go like fast and messy, we shipped so many bugs that the data coming back to us was too hard to parse. Like, are people not using it because they literally cannot? Like it's too buggy to rely on for work, or are people not using it because it doesn't have product market fit? And both of them just look like no retention, right? So it was so hard for us to parse and created this lack of clarity. So actually, I always think like, oh, we should have shipped slightly slower, but done it right. And your advice is the exact opposite. So I guess
No,
there's
but I
right?
love that. That's actually a really good point because we had this problem as well with Makelog last year where we were trying to ship so many things. Yes, reducing scope 100,000%, yes. Because our scope was massive. Our scope was massive. We wound up having this product at the end of the day that was a little Frankenstein-y. And yes, we shipped it fast and things were out there, but it was so Frankenstein-y and there were things that, I mean, there was a lot of UX debt, I would have to say, if I'm honest. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right that if we had narrowed the scope a little bit too and shipped fast, that we'd be way better off because, we're only now just kind of realizing.
It's so amazing what you're saying. Startups start off in this like parallel universe where like we all learn the same lessons together. And yeah. But if I were to rewind Jam 2 years back, we were in the same place. We had this sort of vision of how teams would work together, and that vision was very featureful. And we built a lot of features. Like we had two-way syncs with all the main issue trackers, so that you could just be in this Jam browser and you would know what the status of various Jira tickets was. And we had this feature that let you WYSIWYG edit elements you see in your website and suggest the PR, the CSS diff, and the text diff to GitHub without touching code. Like we had this vision of how people would work together, like making the web like Figma, making the web like Google Docs. But it was so feature rich, and we never validated one feature at a time. And actually, if we kept scope small, like now it's possible we may go and like build towards the same vision, but we just reduced all the scope, and that helped us get enough clarity to actually move forward.
Yeah, totally.
JJ, thank you so much for coming on 100% Builders. Who should go check out Makelog, and how do they do that, and how do they follow you?
Yes. So any software development teams, product managers, engineers, engineering managers should go check out Makelog at makelog.com.
Amazing. And where can people follow you?
Oh, I am on Twitter. My handle is, I think, hi, Julie Jennifer. And on LinkedIn.
Amazing. And I'll just like pump you up here that what people may not realize about Makelog is you don't need an engineer to configure it for you. So if you're a PM and you just want to make sure that you know exactly what just got released to staging and exactly what got released to prod, and you want that sent to you in Slack and in a nice web UI, you can go sign up for Makelog. Just auth in with your GitHub credentials and your Linear or Jira or whatever it is credentials. And then all that automation can be set up for you, and you don't need an engineer's help. So it's going to make you a lot more productive, and you don't have to like bother anyone for anything. So that it might not just be obvious. Everyone should go check it out. It's super awesome.
Thanks so much, Danny. Appreciate it.
Thank you, JJ. Bye. Bye.